All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. It is always good to have your company, and today is no different. Thanks for joining me. Just going to mention something really exciting for the show, and that is that at last the show has its own piece of digital real estate. That's right, Exceptional Leadership Podcast has its very own website, and I'd love you to go along and check it out. It is all one word. It's exceptionalleadershippodcast.com. I was really surprised to find out that the .com designation was available, so I snapped it up. I thought that was pretty awesome. So we've got our own website. The reason I've set it up is because A, it's really good to own your own piece of digital real estate as a business or an organization, so I wanted to get that done. But I also wanted to expand the value proposition for you as a listening cohort above and beyond the podcast. And there's two ways I'm doing that. The first is something on the website called Leadership Insights. And what that is basically blog posts, fortnightly blog posts on relevant leadership topics that we've covered on the show over the last, nearly year and a half that I've been doing it. And I'll continue to do that into the future on at least a fortnightly basis. So the idea of this is that it will act as a central repository for value when it comes to leadership and the insights around that space. I've got 3 up there at the moment, and it will continue to expand as time goes on. But what I'd love you to do is just duck in there and, as you need to, browse topics that are of relevance to you at this particular point in time and just brush up on your knowledge outside of the podcast that way. Reading sometimes means you absorb information in a bit of a different way to just listening. So by all means, go and check out Leadership Insights and brush up on your knowledge as you need to that way. So that's one way that I'm providing a little bit more value above and beyond just the show. The second thing is a product called The Brief. Now, I say product, it's completely free, and there's no marketing attached with it or anything like that. It's called The Brief at exceptionalleadershippodcast.com. Click on that, and it will basically ask you to submit your name and email. And if you do that, you're going to get 5-minute leadership insights fortnightly sent directly to your inbox. So that'll just be whatever's on my mind at the time, whatever I'm focusing on for the upcoming week, and it might prove to be valuable for you if you just want a little bit of motivation for the upcoming week to land in your inbox on a Monday morning. Maybe something you can read with your morning coffee and breakfast as you're preparing for a big week. So head to exceptionalleadershippodcast.com and sign up for The Brief. That'd be pretty cool. Hope it provides value for you guys. That's the intention. All right, I've missed our little story time that we've done many times to get the podcast started. So I thought, let's go back to it. Now, on the face of it, the topic of today's podcast might come across as dry at first glance, but it's actually really important. So we're trying to discuss the nuances of one-to-ones and team meetings today, and it really can't be understated from an importance perspective, especially for new managers who are wondering perhaps how to navigate this sort of thing if you've never done it before. So what I want to do is set the scene a little bit here by mentioning a gentleman called Andy Grove, and he had this thing called a manager's breakfast. It was in the 1980s. Let's read a little bit about what Andy Groves did as CEO of Intel. You might have heard of them before. Let's go. So in the 1980s, Andy Grove, the legendary CEO of Intel, had a ritual that people inside the company talked about consistently. He called it the manager's breakfast. Once a week, Grove would sit down with a small group of managers, not a big meeting, not a presentation, and not a report out, just a breakfast and a conversation. But Andy had 2 rules for the interaction. The first was nothing was off limits, and the second was that managers had to bring real problems. It was information flow, not status updates. Grove believed something most leaders miss, and that was that the quality of a company's decisions is determined by the quality of conversations that are happening inside of it. Now, these breakfasts often surface things that formal reporting never caught. Product problems, cultural frictions, communication breakdowns, and even customer issues. Sometimes the conversations were uncomfortable, but Grove insisted that leaders needed unfiltered reality and not polished updates. And over time, these small conversations created a massive strategic advantage. Intel leaders got faster information, clearer alignment, and better decisions than the competitors. Grove later wrote about this philosophy in his classic management book, High Output Management, where he argued something that's perfect for us to consider as leaders. And that is that meetings and one-to-ones aren't interruptions to the real work that we do day to day as leaders. They are the work. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I've got a bunch of notes on this that I wanted to talk about today. And I guess I just want to set the scene a little bit using that example of Andy Grove at Intel as a bit of context. Now, my view is that Andy had the right approach there because, as the text said, he focused on managers for the one-to-ones. I don't think that one-to-ones are necessary for all staff. So let's say you have a team of 10 people. You might have 3 supervisors within that cohort of 10. I would suggest that it becomes a large drain on your time and everybody else's time within the team if you're going to do one-to-ones with all 10 of those people, and probably unnecessary. I would suggest that a worthwhile approach for you, and this is one that I implement myself, is to just meet one-to-one only with your key leaders, just as Andy Grove did in that example. Now, as I said, I do this in real life, right? I meet one-to-one with my key leaders within my team and maybe senior team members. So maybe not formal managers per se, but if they're senior enough and important enough to what we're doing from a strategic perspective, I might have the occasional one-on-one with them as well. Now, the important nuance to this is that you should only have the one-to-one meetings if it provides value to you as a leader. Now, that might sound selfish, right? Yes, it is ideal, of course, that we are doing something that brings value to both of us, right? So your supervisors that are under you as well. But the reality is that the value ratio might not always be even in this scenario, because your job as a leader is to facilitate these interactions that help you to gain a broader perspective of what's happening across the organization. You need to keep your finger on the pulse. And so these interactions, just by the very nature of your position in the organization, might actually be more valuable to you than the individual managers. But it's your job to keep your finger on the pulse. And the way you do that is by facilitating interactions with key people. If run well, though, it should prove valuable for the managers under you as well, and the team members that you're having one-to-ones with as well, because you will have access to updates and information and broader scale observations than perhaps what they do in their positions, and it might actually serve as a point of reference for them to take back to their teams. So it's a good opportunity to have consistent flow of information. If they hear it straight from you and then take your message and pass it to their teams in a way that's relevant to them, we have this beautiful flow-on effect and consistency of information. So really good to have those touch points for that reason. Now, 2 considerations that I want you to think about, and this is with respect to the rest of the team and what we do with them. So my approach is to make one-to-ones with the rest of the team, so outside of my supervisors and senior employees under me. I make one-to-ones with the rest of the team optional. So it's that open door policy. I don't want you to think that I'm not giving you the option to spend time with me, but I also don't want to make you feel as if it's mandatory, because it really doesn't provide value for either of us if it's this mandatory thing and you don't really have much to tell me, okay? It works because it is important that we as leaders are seen to be engaging and able to be engaged with our staff, right? Ear to the floor sort of stuff here. Now, my experience is, and this is something that you might not have considered, but it's to do with perception and how you're viewed as a leader. My experience is that people often find one-to-ones with the boss a little stressful. It can easily start to feel like a reporting session, and pressure and expectation, whether it's warranted or not, can be associated with that. And if you've got someone who isn't in the management cohort, they're just, a receptionist, or they're a junior project manager, or someone just doing their day-to-day job, they might find it a little strange that you're making one-to-ones with them at their level mandatory. So it's important to understand how your request might make them feel. So I would say spare them of that and just say, guys, I'm going to talk to my managers, one-to-one. If that's something that you would like to pencil in occasionally on an as-needs basis, please feel free, open door policy, put something in the calendar, let's make it happen. So that's one-to-ones. Now we've got team meetings. Now team meetings are a little bit different because in my view, they should be mandatory. As one collective as well. So an all-staff team meeting. Everybody in your team, all in one room together. There's a couple of reasons that I'm a big fan of this, and I think you should be too. Firstly, it builds that connection, right? That sense of we. When we're doing our day-to-day activities as a team, and this is amplified the bigger your team is, you can start to become fractured and disconnected from your teammates, especially across different departments where you might not have a lot of overlap. So we build that connection by bringing everybody together under one roof. It also keeps everybody on the same page in the sense that questions are asked in a one big group setting format. And of course, when you do that, it means that the answers that you give as the head honcho are heard by everybody at the same time in the same room. So it means that transfer of information is a lot cleaner and lands at the same time in the same way, hopefully, with everybody. So from a communication perspective, it's really important. But there are some challenges associated with the running of team meetings. And the first is time. People are busy, okay? We have to respect everybody's time. So we need to have an agenda. I hate it when meetings don't start on time and they feel wishy-washy and pointless. It's much better to go in with a plan, right? We've got 60 minutes to spend together. Let's knock this out. Clear agenda. Everyone feels like they're there for a reason and it makes sense. It doesn't feel like dead time. You will find that if you don't have a good running schedule and an agenda, especially people that are senior level, right, that have full calendars, might start to see it as something that's not giving them a lot of value. They might start to resent it. You want it to be valuable for everybody. So make sure you respect people's time. You start on time. Be ruthless to starting on time, right? Doesn't matter if, someone wants to walk in 5 minutes late. We start on the hour. And we do that to be respectful of our time. And of course, a part of that is we have an agenda. Now, the other really important thing to mention here is that we need to make sure that our actions from the meeting are logged. Now, you can do this via, a useful tool. It can be as simple as pen and paper if you really want to, but other common ones are Excel. You might just have an action register on an Excel spreadsheet, and Microsoft Loop and forums like that. So always make sure that you have actions that are logged as they come up in the meeting, and you assign an owner to those actions, right? There and then in front of everybody, so that you have full accountability, and the actions that come up in a meeting are actually driven to a conclusion because you're assigning an owner that you can then chase up in the preceding weeks before you have your next team meeting. Very important. Now, the other thing is that the meeting itself must actually serve a tangible function and purpose, and that's the reason for starting on time. That's the reason for making sure that we have actions that are documented, and owners assigned via a tool that you can easily consult later. Meetings are a dime a dozen. People often have too many of them in the calendar. So let's make sure that this really important collective team meeting doesn't fall into that category. Make sure it's one that people look forward to by implementing those practices. The other really important thing here is to always leave time for roundtable and questions, maybe for the last 20 to 15 minutes of the meeting. So if you've got an hour, try and get through your actions and your updates as a leader in the first 30 to 40 minutes, and then leave the rest open for questions. We want to know what's going on at the team level as leaders. It's important for our fingers to be on the pulse. When people get talking, it's really valuable for you as a leader to watch the interactions in the room, to hear about what's on the minds of your staff. You might catch up with your senior staff quite regularly, but you're not really hearing from those junior sort of level people. And maybe it's useful just to see what's on their minds and to get potentially solutions from them with respect to problems that might come up. Really good to have a forum for them to have their say. Worst case scenario, if there are no topics that people want to discuss for the last 15 to 20 minutes, that's perfect. It gives people a little bit of time back in their day, and they can transition to their next task after that meeting with a little bit of a buffer. So it works on both levels. Just a note here in closing, for larger teams with multiple teams within them, and this is the case for me and mine, you may need to run separate team meetings. So, for example, the department that I look after, it's the operations department, but within it we have project management, we have admin, we have technical services, and a supervisor for each of those teams. And it's at the point where it is really quite difficult to stay across everything and discuss all the relevant points to each of those departments in just 1 hour together. There's a lot of information flying back and forward over the table, especially by the time you start having general questions and whatnot flying around. So I have found it valuable to have separate team meetings with each of those departments. So I have a team meeting with the admin department, team meeting with the technical services department. I gave the project management team the option, and they said, look, we're all right for now. We get most value out of the general operations meeting, but we'll let you know if that changes. And that's all you have to do. Give them the option, let them know that you're willing to really double down on that communication and offer these additional team meetings if necessary. I've had 2 of those 3 teams go, yep, that'd be great, and we're already seeing a lot of value from that by discussing things that don't normally come out in the operations meeting. And of course, all the same principles that I talked about for your big team meeting apply to those smaller team meetings as well. Log actions via Loop or Excel and make sure that those actions are followed up before the next one to ensure that we get traction and a little bit of a process in place. So that's how I manage it. I hope that you get a few ideas as to how to go about that at your end, and we will leave it there. But guys, just before I do sign off, can I please ask, especially those of you who are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, I've only got 1 5-star review on that platform, but I know a hell of a lot more than one person is listening to the show on Apple Podcasts. So if you wouldn't mind, can you bolster the reviews on there for me and just leave me a 5-star review if you get value from the show. The reason I'm focusing on this is because it really does help small shows like this one. Why? Perhaps a topic that we'll get into on another episode, but it's social proof. It's a marketing concept. If people see that, oh, okay, 15 people have given this show a 5-star rating, that builds credibility in their minds and it makes it more likely that they'll give the show a go. If they see just 1 5-star review, it immediately goes, well, whoever listened to it thought it was good, but obviously it's not that popular. So if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts and you really enjoy it, please go ahead and drop me a 5-star review. And of course, that applies for any other platform that you listen to the show on. I'd be eternally grateful. Guys, go check out exceptionalleadershippodcast.com. And until next week, I'll see you later.